Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast. The Timberwolves fell to the Dallas Mavericks on Tuesday by 12, halting a four-game winning streak by the Wolves. On the post-game pod today, we're going to talk key takeaways, including what happened defensively. Obviously, a shorthanded Timberwolves team, but also taking on a shorthanded Mavericks team. The offense wasn't consistent either. Shot selection was an issue. Still, Karl-Anthony Towns had a massive game himself, so we'll break that down as well. It's all upcoming on the post-game podcast. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm also the editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site and the Fansided Network. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day, and a not so happy post-game podcast. The Timberwolves lost the Mavs on Tuesday by 12, and that's the end of the Wolves' four-game winning streak. A disappointing loss against a really shorthanded Mavericks team. Of course, the Wolves were also shorthanded. We'll break it all down here in just a minute. We'll do key takeaways, individual studs and duds. It's all upcoming on the show. First of all, though, thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Remember, the show is free and available on all platforms. That, of course, includes YouTube now, as well as Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, pretty much anywhere you want to listen and subscribe. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken, which is my account with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, so the Wolves come into this game in Dallas on Tuesday, having just beat the Mavs at home by 6 on Sunday, of course, winning 4 straight. Also, having 5 players missing, really 5 rotation players or 5 players, usually 4 that are in the rotation out due to health and safety protocols. This was yet another game missed by Anthony Edwards, Taurean Prince, and Josh Okogie. But since Sunday's win over the Mavs, both Patrick Beverley and Jared Vanderbilt entered health and safety protocols and therefore were unavailable. Since Sunday, the Mavericks found out they wouldn't have Maxi Kleber, who also entered health and safety protocols, and Kristaps Porzingis, who played 20-ish minutes in Sunday's game against the Wolves, hurt his foot or his toe, I guess, and was questionable, but did miss Tuesday's game. So both of these teams were missing a couple of additional key players from their rotation that played in Sunday's game. And it was just unbelievable. Both teams signed a bunch of guys, brought guys in, 10-day contracts. The Wolves didn't actually use anybody except for Nathan Knight, who's of course a two-way player, but they didn't use either of their 10-day contract guys, Chris Silva or Rajon Tucker, who signed last night after I'd recorded the Tuesday podcast. And they didn't use McKinley Wright either, the other two-way player. So it was really only Nathan Knight. The Mavs, on the other hand, they just signed Marquise Chris today, or I should say on Tuesday, and he played 16 minutes and actually played really well for them. So this was just a really weird. Both teams essentially were missing 4 to 5 rotation guys, half of their rotation. And the Mavs were missing their best player, Luka Doncic. The Wolves were missing their, depending on how you feel about best player rankings, the second or third best player, Anthony Edwards, was missing for Minnesota. So the Mavs ended up being favored, I think, by 1.5 on BetOnline.ag. This was a game I was actually a little surprised the Mavs were favored, given how well the Wolves were playing and the fact that they had Karl-Anthony Towns. Turns out Vegas was right. BetOnline.ag was right. The Mavs did. I think I don't look at this quickly off the top here. I want to say I don't want to look at this and say this is a horrible loss. The Mavs were super shorthanded. Well, I mean, so are the Wolves, and I get that the Mavs didn't have Doncic. The Wolves had Towns, but we've seen over the years just how important having those second tier starters, those guys who are really good defenders that can do stuff. The Wolves haven't had a Jared Vanderbilt or a Patrick Beverley in the past. They've got both of them, and they're both suddenly just gone. Play a bunch of minutes on Sunday. Vando led the team in minutes on Sunday, and they're both just not available Tuesday. That matters, and I think we have to factor that in. There's a reason the Mavs were favored in this game, right? I mean, Vegas is usually pretty on point with these things. So I don't think we can sit here and say this is a horrible loss for the Timberwolves. It's obviously disappointing, and to lose by double digits, to waste a really good Karl-Anthony Towns game. But I also think we can look at it and it's pretty clear why they lost, and we're going to get into that. This was a close game early. It was all offense. Neither team was particularly interested in playing defense early. The Wolves were actually up 1 at the end of the first quarter. And there were plenty of lead changes throughout, even as we got into the second half after the Mavs had already built a couple of different double-digit leads. But early in the game, there was just really no defense at all. It was a track meet. Karl-Anthony Towns was a monster. He scored the first, I think, 7 points for the Wolves in a variety of ways. He got to the free throw line. He had and ones. He made 3-pointers. He had a monster dunk in the first couple of minutes of the game on a pump fake outside the arc, straight line drive to the rim, jump from foot just inside the dotted line, just below the free throw line. And then the second unit came into the game and really kind of struggled for Minnesota. D'Angelo Russell was his jumper was off, which became a theme. We'll talk a lot more about that later. But early in the game, he really struggled, even with open shot attempts. The starting lineup, by the way, the Timberwolves, I wrote about this at Dunking with Wolves. I thought they might try Bolmaro and Jaden McDaniels in the starting lineup, replacing Beverley and Vanderbilt. And of course, with Anthony Edwards, Malik Beasley started for the third consecutive game. That's exactly what they did. But Bolmaro didn't get off the bench in the second half. And the Wolves actually started the second half with Naz Reid on the floor in place of Bolmaro. So they decided to go really big. And the Mavs responded by just playing essentially a small on Naz. And predictably, the Wolves didn't try and take advantage of that. And I get it, because Naz he's a good post-up player, but with Towns on the floor, they were so focused on getting the ball to Towns and getting it to him in an advantageous position. And they finally did it, right? Like, Towns was great in the first quarter. He had a double-double by halftime, but they kind of went away from using Towns in smart ways in the middle portion of the game, really the second quarter. Third quarter, the Wolves got him a couple catches near the free throw line. They got him a couple catches on the perimeter where he could face up and go to work. But then they were still giving him these post touches in the mid post where teams on the side of the floor where teams are just doubling him. And there were a couple of instances in this game where I don't know if we give Anthony Edwards all the credit or not, but since Ant spoke out a couple of weeks ago, 10 days ago or so, about, hey, we tell Cat he's got to go quick, against the double teams before they get there. Well, he did that a couple of times. He spun baseline and beat a double team as the double was still coming from the middle of the floor and got a nice bucket early in the third quarter. There were a couple of instances of that. And generally speaking, Towns had a fantastic game, first quarter, third quarter, especially. And we'll talk about this here in a minute. He only attempted 14 shots in 38 minutes. In a game with no Anthony Edwards, your best player was third in field goal attempts. Can't happen. It just can't happen. But credit to the Mavs. Their defensive strategy, they did enough to deny Towns the ball. They also did a great job on the perimeter against D'Angelo Russell. They did okay against Malik Beasley. Against the Wolves' second unit, they made life really difficult for the Wolves' reserves, who really struggled in this game. Jalen Noel didn't get as many opportunities, didn't really get going, wasn't quite as good in this game. Jordan McLaughlin was pretty quiet when he got his minutes. The Mavs built a 17-point lead in the third quarter. Then the Wolves go on a 13-0 run to pull within 4 points. The Mavs turned right around on a 9-0 run of their own, and at that point, it was basically over. Minnesota kept it close midway through the fourth quarter. And Nathan Knight played really well late in this game. And then the Wolves went from this big lineup with Naz at the 4 and Cat at the 5 to this really small lineup, kind of middle of the fourth, trying to get back into it. D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jalen Noel. So Beasley and Noel on the floor together, and Jaden McDaniels at the 4. And Chris Finch has not played Jaden McDaniels at the 4 very often at all in his tenure in Minnesota over the past, dating back to last season. But they gave that a shot, and it didn't work either. And the Wolves just could not find the right lineup combination. So ultimately, they lose by 12. It was a little closer than that. Again, there were plenty of lead changes, but Dallas kind of in the fourth quarter, they kind of kept the Wolves at arm's length for much of it. It never really felt like, I mean, even after that 13-0 run in the third quarter, it just really didn't feel like this was a game that the Wolves ever really had a good feel for in general, right? And there were a lot of things that weren't clicking. And we're going to get into that here in just a minute. I want to hit key takeaways from this one before we do individual studs and duds. So we're going to get to that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at Calm. Do you want to know what makes LeBron James, King James, sleep? That's right. Sleep is his superpower. Calm, the #1 app for sleep and meditation, has teamed up with LeBron James to help you activate the power of sleep. LeBron and Calm know that your mind is like any other muscle in your body, but you don't have to be a world champion to learn how to train it. Calm can help you train your brain so you sleep better, reduce your stress, and perform at your best, just like King James. For LeBron, sleep is a critical part of his mental fitness routine. As he says, quote, "Getting good sleep and finding time to rest is one of the most valuable things I can do for my body and mind. From the sound of rain falling on leaves to bedtime sleep stories, Calm puts me to sleep within minutes, which means I wake up ready for any challenge," unquote. So if you head to calm.com/LockedOnNBA for a limited time, you'll get 40% off a Calm premium subscription. With Calm, you have access to the nature scenes like the ones that LeBron loves, like Rain on Leaves, and so much more like sleep stories and meditation, so you can be ready for any challenges that life throws your way. Again, for a limited time, our listeners can join LeBron in using Calm and get a 40% discount on a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/LockedOnNBA. Unlock content to help you focus, ease stress, and sleep better. Get started at calm.com/LockedOnNBA. That's calm.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, let's talk key takeaways. So number one, we said this after the game Sunday. So this would have been Monday's podcast, the post game pod from Sunday night, the win over the Mavs. That the Wolves, they did a really good job against Dallas in terms of getting enough second chance opportunities, getting out in transition enough. The Mavs turn the ball over the least of any team in the league. The Wolves turn their opponents over the most, right? So the Wolves have the highest opponent turnover percentage, which is a good thing. The Mavs had the lowest turnover percentage themselves, which is obviously good for them. Something had to give. And in this game, the Wolves only managed to turn Dallas over 10 times. I believe second chance points. I think they had like 2 buckets in second chance points. Or excuse me, fast break points, which is essentially in most cases points off turnovers or fast break points off of defensive rebounds. Minnesota was limited there, and not having Anthony Edwards makes a big difference there, and also Patrick Beverley to some extent, and really Jared Vanderbilt too. All those guys are good in the category of securing defensive rebounds, getting out in transition, and then obviously I should say creating turnovers. Beverley and Vanderbilt especially are so good at that, at steals, at blocks, at just deflections, at disrupting things defensively, and that of course then directly leads to fast breaks, and that was missing. And we'll get into the defense specifically here in a second. But the lack of forced turnovers, the lack of offensive rebounds, the Wolves had 9 offensive rebounds, but like 3 of them were on one possession to Nathan Knight. And I mean, I think only 2 actually led to baskets. I think the Wolves had 2, maybe 3 second chance buckets in this game. And that's another category where both Jared Vanderbilt and Patrick Beverley, I know Patrick Beverley's a guard, but he's a really good rebounding guard. Not having him matters. There's a drop off. And by the way, D'Angelo Russell, who's generally a decent rebounding guard, had 1 rebound in 36 minutes in this game, which is not what you need ever, but especially not when there's no Patrick Beverley and there's no Jared Vanderbilt. You need him to get more than 1 rebound, and that unfortunately did not happen for the Wolves in this game. So lack of forced turnovers, so lack of steals, lack of offensive rebounds. The Wolves were not shooting well enough from the rest of the floor or in the rest of the area from anywhere else on the floor, really, to make up for the lack of second chance points, to make up for the lack of fast break points, to make up for the lack of forced turnovers on the Mavericks. They only shot 32.5% from 3. They were 45.6% from the field, but it just, the offense never clicked well enough. I mean, they scored 102 points, but it never clicked well enough to overcome those issues that they can't afford to have those gaps, especially against a depleted Mavericks rotation as well. The second key takeaway for me is the defense as a whole, but I thought to me it was more the defensive communication than anything else. I thought the Wolves for the most part played hard. They did get, 5 block shots, and Towns was actually pretty good in the paint. Nathan Knight was impressive. He had a couple of really good possessions where he was guarding on the perimeter. He blocked Boban at one point, Boban Marjanovic. I thought both Nathan Knight and Karl-Anthony Towns played well. It was point of attack defense struggled the most. So D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, who had improved a little this year, struggled. Jordan McLaughlin struggled when he got his minutes. Jalen Noel struggled. Point of attack defense was not good. And the overall defensive communication, there were some issues, again, with the low man being in the right spot. Some of those things cropped up in this game. And you lose your best defensive communicator, one of the best defensive communicators in the league in Patrick Beverley. That really matters. You miss one of the best defenders in the league in Patrick Beverley, and somebody who's rapidly becoming one of the best defenders in the league, and a very good rebounder in Jared Vanderbilt. That matters as well. And so no Beverley, no Vanderbilt, that's going to tank your defensive communication very quickly. And unfortunately, Russell, who's usually pretty good in terms of communicating on defense, and also Karl-Anthony Towns, those guys didn't do enough, especially Russell. I mean, Towns again was decent defensively to really step into that void created by the absence of Russell and Beverley and Vanderbilt. My third takeaway was Chris Finch just kind of searching for something when it came to the rotation. And obviously I'm not saying this is a bad thing or a good thing. It obviously didn't really work in this game, but you're missing 5 rotation guys. You sign 2 guys who haven't even been in the organization, or I guess 1 guy who's literally not been in the organization at all, and Rajon Tucker, and a guy who hasn't been in an NBA game for your team in Chris Silva. And you're playing 2 two-way guys who were in Vegas the day prior that weren't expecting to be in Dallas for this game. Um, I mean, obviously, you're going to search for some lineup combinations. That meant Balmaro started. That meant Jake Layman or Jalen Noel was the first guy off the bench. Jake Layman got minutes early in the second quarter. They tried Reed and Towns together for stretches in the second half. Nathan Knight played a little bit with Naz Reid as well, with Towns resting. Balmaro ran some point guard. That did not go well. Jalen Noel ran some point guard. That went a little bit better, although he wasn't quite as good as he had been the last 2 times out, getting rotation minutes. So, there's some things like Balmaro at point guard doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I don't think he's shown at this point the ability to really, and he's not a point guard, period, but the ability to run an NBA offense at a high level, he just hasn't shown that. I don't understand why, matchups be damned. I think you'd rather have Jordan McLaughlin or Jalen Noel doing that if Russell's on the bench. And Russell played 36 minutes. But we saw all 3 of those guys, Balmaro, McLaughlin, Noel, all had opportunities to run and initiate offense for the Wolves in this game. The Jake Layman minutes were okay in the first half. They were not as good in the second half. And, it just, there was just this 4 guys played 35 minutes or more for Minnesota. Everybody else was 24 minutes or less. The other 6 guys that played. And again, Finch was just searching for something. And unfortunately didn't really ever find it. Again, point of attack defense, bad across the board, and the rotation. He was searching for Balmaro. I was a little surprised he didn't go back to Balmaro in the second half, just because the point of attack defense was so bad. Not that he was great in the first half, because they gave up 34 points in the first quarter. But Balmaro, his thing is supposed to be on ball defense. So I was actually a little surprised he didn't get more opportunity in the second half. And then also the other stuff that was really, the lack of generating turnovers on Dallas. And then overall shot selection and offense. Again, they shot the ball okay in general. They got to the free throw line a little bit. But D'Angelo Russell, we'll talk more about him last segment. Spoiler, I think we all know which category he'll be in of studs and duds after this one. He was 1 of 11 on threes. And at some point, D'Lo's got to recognize, hey, I don't have it tonight. Like, D'Lo that has it, D'Lo that's hot, is unstoppable. He can jack threes at any point. It's not a bad shot. But when you're 1 for 7, 1 for 8, 1 for 9, like, hey, slow down here. Let's get Cat, who shot the ball 14 times total and just 4 threes, and is, by the way, 3 of 4 outside the arc in this game. Let's get him the ball in an advantageous position, or even not. I mean, the only 3 he missed was his last attempt, and it was kind of like a, hey, I've got to shoot this, when they were down, I think, 6 in the final couple of minutes type of attempt. I'd rather have Cat shooting those attempts when he's had such a good game. I mean, period. I'd rather have him shooting them. But D'Lo was just cold from the field in this game. And Towns should have been taking more of those shots. Malik Beasley had a good game as well. But the general shot selection, and this is mostly D'Lo, but a little bit of Jalen Noel there in the second half. Both of those guys are guys that are going to try to shoot their team back into the game. That was not, it was not exactly how Chris Finch, I don't think, drew it up. So at any rate, let's get into individual studs and duds. I'm going to name 3 studs and I think just 1 dud in this game. So we'll do that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends at betonline.ag. BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowl season and the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number 1 spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll receive that bonus. From basketball to football, NHL to boxing and UFC, right on down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the rest of 2021 and into 22. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline, where the game starts. Let's also talk about our friends over at Built Bar. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or even better than a candy bar in many instances. Built Bar is filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor and covered in chocolate, but still amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, yet high in protein. You'll get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. Built Bar gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. Or if you're just standing in endless shopping lines, Built Bar can give you that extra something to keep you going. So throw it in your jacket pocket or your purse. You'll never know when you might need it. And if you want to cozy up with something warm, here's a holiday secret. Dip your Built Bar into a piping hot cup of cocoa, Let it melt just a little bit. Give your beverage a bit of that Built Bar flavor. Plus, you'll have a nice melty Built Bar to go along with it. Be sure that you'll have a couple of napkins on hand as well. And if you like some of those marshmallowy treats around the holidays, I know I do. You have to get your hands on Built Bar Puffs. They're light, fluffy, and marshmallowy through and through, different flavors, all covered in chocolate. They taste so good, you will not believe that they're filled with protein. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. Again, built.com, promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. All right, individual studs and duds from Wolves Mavs. Karl-Anthony Towns was fantastic. It's not his fault. He only got 14 shots up. I thought he was appropriately aggressive in this game. He did have 5 turnovers, and at least 3 of them were just really bad. At one point, he just threw the ball into the stands. That was a bad turnover. He had a couple bad hero type, attempt passes, but overall was really good in this game. He was easily the best player on the floor for Minnesota. 26 points on 9 of 14 shooting, 3 of 4 outside the arc. Again, his only missed 3 was kind of almost a desperation shot late in the game. Perfect 5 of 5 at the line, 14 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 blocks in this game. And the 5 turnovers, he was not in foul trouble, which is fantastic. He played a team high, or I'm sorry, 38 minutes, which was actually Jaden McDaniels played 39 in this game. But Cat was fantastic, especially early in the first quarter, early in the third quarter. Besides that, you got to credit the Mavs, who have a good defense, doing a good job denying him the ball. And when he got the ball in certain positions on the floor, they were crashing, they were double teaming him. Outside of that first really 5 minutes of this game, the Mavs did a great job on Towns, and the Wolves didn't counter. They did not adjust and get Towns the ball, at the elbows enough, which, by the way, I don't know what happened to what has happened here where the Wolves have stopped using those horns, kind of elbow extended looks in offensive. And they still do it, and they do it, I guess, less with no Anthony Edwards. But I, I don't know. I just think Towns getting the ball at the elbows, it makes so much more sense for him to get the ball kind of middle of the floor versus the mid post, versus the low post. Even if he's getting it on the wings and facing up, we saw a lot of success for him doing that in this game. And, credit opposing defenses for a strategy, but the Wolves have to adjust at some point and get Cat the ball in better spots. That's just something that has been an issue, and it needs to get adjusted. Another stud for me, Malik Beasley, really good in this game. He missed a couple shots early, but then was pretty much lights out the rest of the game. 22 points on 8 of 15 shooting, 6 of 12 outside the arc. Fantastic, 50% from 3, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. He did have 4 turnovers, but they did a lot of dribble handoff action with him to get him some shots. They ran him off of some pin downs, and that's how the Wolves should be using Malik Beasley. But we just hadn't seen a lot of that so far this year. Coming off the bench, Naz Reid's not as good of a screener as Karl-Anthony Towns. They don't run the same sets with him coming off the bench. They ran more stuff for him in this game. I'm convinced of that. And I've been clamoring for months now. Malik Beasley should be a starter. When Anthony Edwards comes back, I think you still start Malik Beasley. I think he's much, much, much better running with the first unit. Even if he plays, even if he comes off the bench and plays 26 minutes and 20 of them are with Towns and 20 of them are with, primarily starters, it's got to be a psychological thing with him. It's got to be a rhythm thing, him starting the game with the starters versus coming in cold off the bench and mixing in with the starters. As we know, some guys are just, Jamal Crawford was just better as a sixth man, even if he was on the floor in crunch time, right? I'm not talking about Timberwolves Jamal Crawford necessarily, but Jamal Crawford as a player, as a whole, as arguably the best sixth man in NBA history. Some guys are just better as starters or better as bench guys. And I think Malik Beasley plays better as a starter. And of course he plays better alongside better players. And so that's another way to ensure that he does that is he plays off of Karl-Anthony Towns and he plays off of D'Angelo Russell. So all that to say, Malik was great in this game. And, ignore the plus minus. He had a team worst minus 19. He was very good. This is an example of that stat being extremely noisy for this game. My third stud for this one, I'm going to go with Naz Reid. He was really good. Off the bench, 11 points, 3 rebounds in 18 minutes, 4 of 6 shooting. He hit 3 of 4 3-pointers. And Naz had started the year so well outside the arc, had really struggled here for the last couple of weeks, especially on 3-point attempts, but just in general, hadn't been playing as well as he did early in the season. And for Naz, when he plays with Towns, he has to be able to knock down open jumpers, and he did that in this game. Across the board, taking Towns out of the equation, the Wolves haven't hit open jumpers from the perimeter at a league average rate or anywhere near that. I mean, nobody was shooting league average just earlier I guess before this winning streak, there wasn't a single player on the roster besides Towns that was shooting league average individually from 3-point range. And Nas needs to be, if he's going to force Chris Finch to put him on the floor with Towns for stretches, he has to be able to knock down open 3-point attempts. He did that in this game. He was good enough in the paint. He battled with Marjanovic well enough. You'd love to see him have more than 3 boards in 18 minutes in a game that the Wolves were out rebounded by 5 and struggled on the glass in general. But good game from Nas, most definitely. I also should shout out, I gave Nas the nod as a stud, but Jaden McDaniels in his 39 minutes, he had some defensive issues, and I think there's been some lapses on that end and some technique issues for McDaniels this year. But he had 11 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals in 39 minutes. And for the most part, I mean, he really stayed out of foul trouble. So he deserves a shout out. It was a good game from Jaden McDaniels. Duds for this game, D'Angelo Russell. Don't have to think twice about that one. If you watch the game, you know what I'm talking about. 14 points, 12 assists. Looks nice. But he made just 4 shots on 18 attempts, 1 of 11 outside the arc. Just 1 rebound in this game, committed 3 turnovers. Not a good D'Lo game. Had a couple of nice moves, nice plays going to the basket. A 3-point play right before halftime, I think it was, which was great. But this, as I said earlier, he's just got to know and have a better feel for like, hey, I don't have it tonight. I'm not just going to jack up a bunch of 3-pointers as we're trying to play catch up here. No Anthony Edwards. If Anthony Edwards, and I've complimented Russell since he came back from the ankle injury a little over a week ago, that he has had good feel for, hey, Ant's having a big night, or Ant is going to, do his thing. I'll stay over here and I'll score 18 on, 14 shots or whatever. That's great. And I don't know if it's because there was no Anthony Edwards. I mean, obviously it worked out okay the other night against Dallas on Sunday, but I don't know if it's because D'Lo was pressing with no Ant or pressing because they fell behind or what happened. But the feel wasn't there for D'Lo in this game. He just did not do the things that we've come to expect over the past couple of weeks. This was much more like late October D'Angelo Russell that we saw a couple months ago towards the start of the season than it was mid-December D'Angelo Russell that we've come to know and love over the past couple of weeks. So tough game for D'Lo, to be sure. Already talked about the rotation, kind of talked around some of the guys that just had okay performances. I liked Nathan Knight's game. Not a sexy line by any means, but 4 rebounds in 13 minutes and a block. He played well. He was actually one of only 2 Timberwolves players, or I guess 3 Timberwolves players with a positive plus minus, and easily had the best one with a +8. But this was also just a weird game for plus minus because of all the runs and the times that they happened. It was just a very odd game in general. So the Wolves lose. They now fall half game behind Dallas. They're back into 9th in the Western Conference. The 4-game winning streak is snapped. They go to Utah to take on the Jazz on Thursday, and then a 3 days off, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. They don't play again until next Monday, the 27th, at home against the Boston Celtics. So a nice little break here after Thursday's game. Well, of course, on Thursday, we'll preview Wolves Jazz. We've only seen the Jazz once this season, and it was only a little over a week and a half ago, I guess. That did not turn out well for the Wolves. But we'll preview Wolves Jazz. We'll talk about what type of rotation tweaks the Wolves might have upcoming on Thursday. Hopefully, a couple of these guys that are on the health and safety protocols list will come back here sooner rather than later, and perhaps there's even a chance that they come back on Thursday. So we'll break it all down on Thursday's show, and then, of course, have the post-game pod following that on Friday. So that's all we have for you today. Thank you to those of you that do subscribe and make Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Remember, the show's free and available on all platforms. That includes YouTube, and also all the audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, and the all-new Odyssey app. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. That's all we have for you today. Thanks for listening to Locked On Wolves, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.